My parents disowned me for refusing to follow their perfect life plan. Now that I've built a successful life on my own, they're back, demanding a share. Growing up, my parents always had a plan for me. A flawless, meticulously crafted blueprint for what my life should look like. They envisioned me as a doctor, married to a well-mannered wife from an appropriate family, living in a house they approved of, and raising children they could dote on. There was no room for deviation, no space for personal dreams. From the moment I was old enough to understand expectations, they drilled into me that everything they did was for my future. Every decision was already made. The schools I would attend, the extracurriculars I would participate in, even the friends I should keep. They believed that because they sacrificed so much, I owed them absolute obedience. But as I grew older, I started to see through the illusion. Their perfect plan wasn't about my happiness. It was about their status. I didn't want to be a doctor. I had no interest in the rigid life they envisioned. What I did have was a passion for business and technology, but in their eyes, that was a waste of time. When I told them I wanted to pursue something different, they didn't just disagree. They took it as a personal betrayal. The disappointment in their eyes quickly turned into rage. "You're throwing your life away," my mother screamed. "You'll be a failure," my father added coldly. "And don't expect us to support your stupidity." From that moment, the emotional manipulation began. If I refused to follow their script, I wasn't just making a bad choice. I was hurting them. My mother would cry, saying she sacrificed everything for me, and my father would glare at me in disgust. My younger sibling, who always did exactly what they wanted, was used as the shining example of a good child. At first, I tried to compromise. I told them I could study something in business while also learning coding, but they saw it as rebellion. My refusal to become a doctor was enough for them to start treating me like a failure. Every dinner became a battlefield. Every conversation a reminder that I was the disgrace of the family. But the breaking point came when I turned 18. I had gotten accepted into a prestigious university for business and technology. A dream come true for me, but instead of celebrating, my parents were furious. They had secretly applied to medical schools on my behalf, expecting me to just obey. "You think you can just throw away everything we built for you?" my father seethed. "You are selfish," my mother sobbed. "How could you do this to us?" That night, they gave me an ultimatum. Reject my acceptance and go to medical school or leave their house. I left. I walked out with nothing but a suitcase and whatever money I had saved from a part-time job. My parents didn't even look at me as I left. Their message clear: I was no longer their son. I had no support, no home, and no one to turn to, but I refused to break. I worked multiple jobs, took out student loans, and poured every ounce of effort into building my future. I slept in cheap motels, crashed on friends' couches, and barely scraped by. But through all the struggles, I refused to regret my decision. Years passed. I built my own business, and through sheer determination, it became successful. I was no longer the broke, abandoned kid they left behind. I had a thriving career, financial stability, and a life I was proud of. But just as I was finally living the life I wanted, my parents resurfaced. Years had passed since the night I walked out of my childhood home with nothing but a suitcase and a shattered heart. In that time, I had fought, struggled, and clawed my way into success. What started as freelance gigs turned into a small tech startup. Long nights, financial risks, and sheer determination built my business from the ground up. Now, I had more than just stability, I had freedom. I lived in a beautiful home I bought with my own hard-earned money. I had a close-knit circle of supportive friends, and I was finally living a life where I answered to no one but myself. My parents' voices had once been inescapable in my mind, their words of doubt and manipulation ringing in my ears even after I left. But now they were just distant echoes. I thought I had escaped them for good, until they came back. It started with an unexpected phone call. The name on the screen made my stomach drop. Mom. I hadn't spoken to her in years. Not a single call, not a single text. Not when I was struggling, not when I was on the verge of giving up, and certainly not when I finally made it. I hesitated, my thumb hovering over the screen. I should have ignored it, but curiosity, or maybe some lingering sense of obligation, made me answer. Hello. For a moment there was silence, then a shaky breath. It's been so long, my mother said, her voice suddenly soft and warm, as if nothing had happened. How have you been? I clenched my jaw. I knew this game. This was the guilt trip approach. Start with fake warmth, make me feel bad for the distance they created, and then pull me back into their web. I've been fine, I said curtly. Why are you calling? There was a pause, and then she sighed heavily, as if I was the one being difficult. Your father and we wanted to see you. It's been too long. We miss you. They miss me. The same parents who disowned me for daring to have my own dreams. The same parents who never once reached out when I was struggling. I'm surprised to hear that, I said dryly. Well, things have been hard for us lately. There it is. The real reason. I stayed silent, waiting for her to continue. It's your father, she said, her voice now trembling slightly. He lost his job a while back, and, well, things have been difficult. We had to take out some loans. And your sibling, they're struggling too. We're in a tough spot, sweetheart. Sweetheart. A term of endearment I hadn't heard since I was a child. It was like a weapon, meant to soften me, make me forget. You mean to tell me, I said slowly, that after years of ignoring me, after throwing me out with nothing, you're coming back because you need money? Don't say it like that, my mother snapped, dropping the gentle act in an instant. We're family. Families help each other. That's what we always taught you. I let out a hollow laugh. Family helps each other? That's rich, coming from the people who abandoned me when I needed them most. We didn't abandon you, she continued, as if she could hear my thoughts. You left. You chose to walk away from us. I gritted my teeth. You gave me an ultimatum. I either lived the life you wanted, or I had no place in your house. I didn't choose to leave. I was forced out. We were just trying to do what's best for you. No, you were doing what was best for you. The conversation went back and forth, my mother refusing to take responsibility, twisting the narrative to make it seem like I was the one who had hurt them. But I refused to play along. Then came the final blow. We need you to help us financially, she admitted, her voice no longer pretending to be soft and motherly. We raised you, gave you everything, and now it's time for you to repay that debt. Debt? That word hit me like a slap. So that's what I am to you? An investment? I asked coldly. You didn't raise me because you loved me. You did it because you expected a return? My mother hesitated, but then she went for the last card she had left. Your father and I are getting older. We won't be around forever. Are you really willing to turn your back on us? On your own blood? That was the moment I knew. They weren't here because they regretted what they did. They weren't here because they missed me. They were here because they saw my success and felt entitled to it. And worst of all, they weren't asking for help. They were demanding it. I took a deep breath. I'm sorry you're struggling, I said, though I didn't really mean it. But I built my life without you, and I don't owe you anything. My mother let out a horrified gasp. You selfish. I ended the call before she could finish. I expected that to be the end of it, that they would realize they had lost all control over me and move on. But I underestimated just how desperate they were, because the next thing I knew, they weren't just calling me. They were suing me. The letter arrived a week later. At first, I thought it was just more junk mail, another bill, or some financial paperwork I needed to look over. But when I saw the sender's name, my stomach twisted into knots. It was from my parents. More specifically, it was from their lawyer. My hands trembled as I tore open the envelope. Inside was a lawsuit. My parents were officially taking me to court, claiming that since they had invested in my upbringing, I was legally and morally obligated to provide for them now that they were struggling. I let out a hollow laugh, a mix of disbelief and bitterness. They really went this far, after everything they had done, kicking me out, abandoning me, refusing to support me in my worst moments. They now had the audacity to demand my money, and not just demand it, but sue me for it? I knew my parents had a twisted sense of entitlement, but this was a whole new level. I sat down, my heart pounding. I skimmed through the paperwork, the ridiculous claims they had made. They wanted a portion of my income, calling it reimbursement for my childhood expenses, food, shelter, education. They even had the nerve to put a specific number on it, calculating how much it had supposedly cost to raise me and tacking on emotional damages for me cutting them off. It was insane. But it wasn't just about money. No, this was about control. This was about making me feel like I could never escape them, never truly be free. And that's when I knew. I had spent years living with guilt, constantly wondering if maybe, just maybe, I had been too harsh. But this was my confirmation. They never loved me, not in the way parents should love their child. I was nothing more than an asset to them, a tool to be used and discarded when I didn't comply with their plans. They didn't see me as their son. They saw me as their retirement plan. I wasn't going to let them win. I immediately called a lawyer, someone I trusted to handle this situation with the seriousness it deserved. After reviewing the case, my lawyer assured me that this lawsuit was beyond absurd. There was no legal basis for their claim. Parents are not entitled to financial compensation from their children just because they raised them. Still, it didn't mean they couldn't make my life miserable trying. The next few months were a nightmare. The lawsuit itself wasn't strong, but that didn't stop my parents from dragging my name through the mud. They told family members that I was a selfish, ungrateful son who abandoned them in their time of need. They spread lies about me, claiming I had stolen from them, that I had cut them off for no reason, that I was cruel and heartless. I started getting messages from relatives I hadn't spoken to in years. How could you do this to your own parents? They raised you. You owe them everything. Blood is thicker than water. Don't you care what happens to them? I ignored most of them. I knew the truth, and that was enough. But there was one person who did matter, my sibling. For years, we had drifted apart. They had always followed our parents' wishes, never questioning them, never challenging them. And now, they had chosen to stand by them, believing their lies without even hearing my side. I don't understand why you're doing this, they finally said when they called me one evening. Mom and Dad just want some help. Why can't you just be the bigger person? I clenched my jaw. The bigger person? You mean the person who gets treated like a human ATM? They raised us, my sibling insisted. You should be grateful. I let out a bitter laugh. No, they raised me so I could be useful to them. The second I stopped being useful, they threw me out like trash. And now, the only reason they're back is because they see me as useful again. They're our parents, my sibling said, almost pleading. No, I said firmly. They stopped being my parents the moment they decided I wasn't worth keeping around unless I followed their perfect little script. Silence. Then my sibling sighed. Fine, do what you want. But don't expect me to stand by you when you're alone and regret this. I closed my eyes. I never expected you to stand by me in the first place. The lawsuit was thrown out almost immediately. The judge didn't even let it drag on. There was no case. My parents had no claim over my life, my money, or my success. And just like that, they lost everything. But they weren't done trying. Since the courts wouldn't force me to give them money, they resorted to the only weapon they had left: public shame. They went to social media, posting long, dramatic messages about how their ungrateful son had abandoned them. They even tried going to the news with their sob story, claiming I had refused to care for my sick and struggling parents. I let them scream into the void, because while they were busy playing the victims, I was busy living my life. Their lies didn't hurt me anymore. Their words didn't have power over me anymore. And most importantly, I wasn't the one who lost in the end. They were. The last time I saw my parents was almost a year after the lawsuit was dismissed. I was at a restaurant, celebrating a milestone in my company with my team. I had built a life for myself that I was proud of. A life where I wasn't constantly seeking validation or approval from people who never truly cared about me. And then, out of the corner of my eye, I saw them. They were sitting at a cheap diner across the street, looking miserable, worn down, and bitter. My father, once so proud and domineering, looked defeated. My mother, once so controlling and manipulative, looked exhausted. They had lost their power. They had lost me. For a brief moment, I wondered if they had changed. If maybe, just maybe, they had finally realized what they had done. But then I saw the look in my mother's eyes. Anger, not regret, not remorse. Anger, because in her mind, I was still the villain. I was still the one who had betrayed them. And that was when I knew there was nothing left to salvage. So I turned away, walked back into my celebration, and never looked back. They had chosen their path, and I had chosen mine. And for the first time in my life, I truly felt free. Be sure to comment and tell me your opinion about the OP. If you guys like this confession and want to listen more confession story like this, then click on the like button and subscribe to me. Your sub motivate me to create more video like this. See you in a next video with new story.